Welcome to the show. I'm Josh Taylor.
And I'm Jenna Morton. And though we are in the midst of a cold snap here in winter in Canada, we are talking about the beach today, about why you want to go in the winter and why you want to use this time to plan ahead for the summer. And we have the best beach ambassador for our province here with us, East Coast Mermaid, Crystal Rashad. Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
I am so excited about this conversation because you just put out, you have all kinds of fantastic information on your website, but specifically you just put out a post about beach combing for beach glass in the winter that I think kind of blew a lot of people's minds because most people do not consider this a winter activity.
Right.
So let's start there.
So I think what inspired it was the fact that rewind to 2020, when we were all stuck inside our homes and we couldn't do anything, the minute the beaches in the area started to, have sand visible again and the ice melt a little bit, the first thing I started doing was going beach combing because it was a way to not be around anyone else, not see anyone, but be able to get outside, get some exercise, and do one of my favorite things. And over the years, it's just continued to be a tradition. Now we beach comb in the winter on Grand Manan Island because we have a place there, and there the beaches are open 365 days a year. They don't ice over. It's the Bay of Fundy. So it's a really great winter activity that you can do that gives you those summer feels because you're still getting to find all sorts of treasures. But you get to find some really cool stuff, and the beaches aren't as busy as they are in the summer.
Yeah. Which leaves more to find, right?
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And we've been getting all of these crazy storms. So I know myself, I've been around home the last month, but all of my friends on Grand Manan, when they had those big windstorms that came through, the stuff they were finding, I was just in the Facebook groups just green with envy because they were finding such great stuff. But that's the thing, you get so excited about hurricanes in the summer because those bring in really great treasures. But in the winter, you get these nor'easters and these wind and rainstorms that we've been having, and those churn the water and bring in some really good stuff too.
Very cool. I want to, as someone who didn't grow up with the ocean, this whole beach combing thing to me is new. So I want to know, because a lot of Maritimers, it's a big deal. It is a really big deal to get out, find Seaglass, what have you. When did it start for you? And what do you think kind of got you so into it?
So I have been very fortunate that my mother put my little bum and toes in the ocean at about 6 months old. I'm a January baby, so we had a cottage. We still have a family cottage near Booktush. And from the minute I was, 6 months old and it was appropriate to put a baby in the ocean, I was in the ocean and I've been there ever since. So growing up and spending summers at a cottage nearby, I was beach combing before I even knew what beach combing was. I was picking up crabs and seashells and eventually sea glass, and we always had really great sea glass at the cottage. So over the years, all of my childhood, we were always collecting sea glass, but it actually breaks my heart because I think of how much of it we tossed because we thought at the time we were just, we're doing the beach a favor, picking up trash. We'd keep the really good stuff. Like we used to find bottles galore and we'd keep those, but a lot of it we would just toss because we were beach cleaning, right? But then as an adult, I really kind of got back into it, started spending more time on Grand Manan Island and on Campobello Island, and I mean, those are just the Seaglass dream here in New Brunswick. We're so lucky to have those two islands. And that's when I really realized that with East Coast Mermaid, where I was already talking about life in New Brunswick and all of the great things about coastal living, that Seaglass was actually a huge part of that. So then I kind of made it my whole personality.
And then you really deep dove right into it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those treasures because you've brought some things in to show us. And I know the people listening to the podcast version can't really see, but we're going to describe what we're looking at. And you can head to Crystal's social media and you'll find pictures and just be wowed. But you have some absolute unicorn gems here of the people who are into looking for sea glass, look for some of these items for years.
Right. So I just mentioned bottles. This one here is probably, I've had a lot of people say it probably might have held baby aspirin, because back in the days, if you had to take aspirin for anything heart related, they didn't want you to have a big bottle because you had to carry it in your pocket, especially for men. So they would make these really tiny little bottles. And this I actually found near Booktush. So this is something that's completely achievable in, a 30-minute radius from Moncton. You can find things like this. I also have a lot of stoppers that I found over the years that just make me very excited. This one here is a turquoise one, which is always the like most coveted.
Gorgeous.
But this is a pirate glass stopper, and so to find something that's actually black all the way through is very rare for stoppers. Not many stoppers are solid black, and pirate glass at that. And then this would have been from a decanter most likely. But yeah, so stoppers are very like bucket list item for Seaglassers.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about when we say a stopper, or they're like, what were these things? Where do they come from?
So these were bottle stoppers. Yeah, so some of them were for decanters, some of them were for bottles of alcohol or medicines and things like that. But back before we had screw tops, we had bottle stoppers. So they would go, I mean, obviously this one doesn't fit, but they would go in the little bottles to close it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you had mentioned pirate glass.
Yes.
Can you explain what pirate glass is? You did quickly say it's black glass that you can't see through.
Right.
So that's super coveted. Let's talk more about this giant chunk you have in front of us too.
Right.
Yeah.
So backtrack. So pirate glass, it doesn't have to be that you can't see all the way through.
Okay.
So this one here just happens to be actual black glass.
Okay.
But pirate glass is typically anything from a red, it can be red, purple, green, brown, but it's so dark at first glance that it almost looks like a rock. So finding pirate glass has actually been my favorite little thing to find this year, because you have to have a really good trained eye for it, because oftentimes it just looks like a rock when it's sitting on the beach.
Interesting.
What's cool about pirate glass is that some of it does date back very, very old times, but a lot of it is actually not from the golden age of piracy from the 1700s and early 1800s. So a lot of times when people find pirate glass, they get really excited because they're like, oh my God, Captain Kidd drank out of this. And it's like, well, probably not, unless you were to find a glass case gin bottle like this. So I found this on Grand Manan this September after one of the hurricanes that we had. It was just laying on the beach like that. And so I started doing some research, and this would have been from the 1700s, maybe early 1800s, definitely from the pirate era. And there is a rumor that Captain Kidd hid treasure on Grand Manan Island, so I was just using this as my own little Oak Island evidence that...
It's more than Oak Island has found. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. That's a good point. And what's really cool about this, so this one is actually kind of green if you look at it in the light, but this would have been blown glass because it has little bubbles in it. And what's cool about this is this would actually contain DNA. Because if you had someone from the 1700s actually blowing into this, there would be little droplets of saliva. So there could literally be like pirate,
this might be the
pirate
proof
DNA
of Captain Kidd
exactly.
right here in our studio.
In the palm of my hand. So I'm going to keep looking for that treasure. And that would be legit possible pirate glass.
Very cool.
But like this is also a piece of pirate glass that's just big, chunky, probably would have come from a bottle, a rum bottle. And I honestly think that's probably where a lot of this idea of pirate glass came from, because the big rum bottles that we picture, you know, Jack Sparrow drinking out of would have been those dark colors.
And the way that one is, like, I 100% would have thought that was a rock.
Yeah.
Like, that you saw, if you see this, if you're just listening, it really does look like just a smooth,
and picture that
gray
buried
rock.
in the sand too.
I'd
with
walk
other
right
rocks.
past it. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I've licked a lot of rocks in my day trying to determine whether they were glass or not, because as soon as you get something wet on it, the color shines through enough that if you hold it up to the light,
that's amazing.
You can,
and honestly, I find
this is really just about me embarrassing myself again and again, right?
If you're looking for pirate glass, I find overcast days are the best that have a little bit of light, but sometimes on the overcast days, I just find you can tell the difference between a shiny rock, because the rocks will typically stay wet a little bit longer, I find, and the glass tends to kind of dry a little bit faster.
Look at these tips. Yeah. Write that down, guys. Write that. But they're things we wouldn't think of, right?
And those are the things that people who haven't done it and want to get into it really want to know, right? They're always reaching out, asking about, you know, where are the best beaches? When's the best time? What part of the beach? So without giving away all the secrets, because I know people are very close about some of their secrets, mostly about locations, but the other tips, what are some tips for people about best times, best places?
So I always tell people I'm a big fan of overcast days. Sunny days, if it's super bright, especially in the morning and you're the first one on the beach and it's bright, it's really hard to see great pieces of glass. So I really love a good overcast day. If I'm going to Campobello for the weekend and I see that it's going to be warm but overcast, I am thrilled, because a cloudier day is actually great for sea glass. A lot of people, there's a misconception that you have to go at low tide. Around here in these waters, often that is the case, because some of our beaches are only accessible at low tide. And at low tide, basically what happens is the tide goes out, and then you have all of this sand that would have been underwater, which is where you can find the treasures. But I'm still a big fan of high tide. I found this pirate stopper at full high tide on Grand Manan Island. I was literally walking on the beach and it washed up onto my feet. Which I feel like would only happen to a mermaid.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I wasn't even looking for sea glass because it was high tide and it just popped up. So walking the waterline, even at high tide, you can find great stuff. But what I like to recommend is, even if high tide's still a couple hours away, there is still, the tide is dropping. So there are still areas that you can scout. I like to kind of walk zigzags, like up and down, so that I'm making sure I get every square foot of beach. But if you're just out for a stroll, just look down and keep your eyes open. It's not, a lot of people think there's a real science to it. It's really just look down. When people go to Campobello and they're like, I didn't find a single piece of sea glass, I'm like, did you look down? Because there's so much on their beaches.
Yeah, I think in that case, it's a lot of that idea of not realizing that glass sometimes looks like rocks.
Yes,
like
right.
a lot of times, until you get that idea in your head and find those first couple pieces, it
Right.
does. You think, oh, I didn't see it. It's because it was there and you thought it was a rock.
And that's an important thing to note because some of the best sea glass beaches are actually rocky beaches. So sandy beaches, you can still find great sea glass. It might not be as tumbled or as cooked as we like to call it, or baked, that we want. But when you go to rocky beaches, those beaches are the ones where you're really going to find the really tumbled, perfectly polished stuff. But because it's rocky, that's when they really tend to not stick out as much because they're sort of buried in with the rocks. It's so funny because I'll post pictures of a piece of sea glass on my Facebook page that's surrounded by beautiful rocks. And it's always funny because I get the rock lovers that are like, wait, did you not pick up that rock that was, upper quadrant, like greenish blue? And I'm like, I didn't even notice the rock at the time. I was going right in for the sea glass. But yeah, so it's you really have to kind of train your eye. I mean, like I said, pirate glass is something that I just really got into in the last couple of years, and now it's all I see when I go to the beach. But I've been with friends sea glassing and said, oh, look, there's a piece of pirate glass, and they'll look and look and they're like, where are you looking? I don't see what you're talking about. And it's crazy. But once you get the hang of it, you see them everywhere.
And is there rare, like ultra rare,
Yeah.
like what is, besides pirate glass, I have heard red is really difficult.
Red is very rare.
Okay.
But it's so funny because red is rare, but it's not as rare as yellow. Yellow is even rarer than
okay.
red, which is not something people talk about a lot, but finding a piece of yellow can be pretty rare. Stoppers are rare. Frozen Charlotte dolls. So this is one of my favorite pieces because I really wanted to find a piece of a frozen Charlotte. So these were made in Germany in around 1850, 1860. So finding a frozen Charlotte is rare because they only made them for, maybe 50 years, not even. And then there was only so many in the world. And so if you find one of those on the beach, it's quite rare. So.
And people, may I see?
Of course.
So this is a doll leg.
It looks like a doll's leg. Very tiny porcelain.
Yeah. Little itty bitty porcelain doll leg. So, but there has been enough of them found that you knew to look for one.
Yeah.
And again, I can see, thinking that would be a rock.
Yeah, I would probably go past that. I would probably not notice
if you didn't see the hole
unless
in
I saw
it. Or the foot.
The foot possibly, depending on how it was.
Yeah, how
but
it laid. Yeah.
Another thing too is marbles. A lot of people get really excited about marbles, but I always like to caution people that a lot of people are seeding marbles now. So seeding is when people go to the beach and they put glass and they break dishes, and the idea is that they're creating sea glass, but the reality is sea glass needs at least 50 to 75 years to actually get tumbled to be sea glass. So
you're littering.
Right, which is not really the best thing,
No.
and especially with marbles. So a lot of people get excited because they'll find a marble at the beach, but the first telltale sign is it's not polished. If it looks perfectly smooth, like it doesn't have a single scratch in it, that was planted. And then a lot of people I know have been finding one marble and then they'll find an identical one like 3 feet away. So it's like, well, obviously this has not been to the sea and back. It was thrown there because people are starting to catch on. Marbles are really cool right now. Let's just throw them all in the ocean and then people will find them. So it's wild how they're starting to be sort of this, faux pas in the sea glass world of seeding beaches and picking uncooked sea glass and things like that.
I can't even fathom that.
I can understand it only from the perspective of I've had so much fun finding things, and I know that we're so much better at not just throwing our bottles overboard or not having as many shipwrecks for these things to be created, that I'm like, we had these really lovely blue gin bottles, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I could go out into the middle of the ocean and toss these in so that they would become sea glass, not to litter, but so that in 50 or 70 years someone would find it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that feels fake to do because a lot of what we're finding is because of a difference in the way we used to live.
Yeah.
Right.
And I find it so fascinating when you're able to like trace back where something comes from. Like you were talking about yellows. I know some of the yellows that show up here on the East Coast have been traced back to really big ashtrays that used to be on cruise ships.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And red is really rare because red was an expensive glass to make back in the day, so they didn't make it for very long. So and it's true, if you go to an antique shop, you don't see a lot of red glassware and things like that. So red, that's another reason why red is rare. So, and even purple, it's actually interesting because I should have picked out some specific purples for you, but most of the purple you find was actually white glass. So back in the day when they used to make wanting white glass, because glass is essentially made with sand, they had to put something in to make sure that when the sun hit it, it didn't change colors and give like an iron color. So they actually used to put manganese in it. And so if you leave some white pieces of glass out in the sun long enough, they will actually turn purple and kind of that lavender color. So often the purple and lavenders we find were actually white glass first that have just been out in the sun for a really long time, and the sun has like a chemical reaction with the manganese, and then that turns it into purple. If you find really dark purple glass, that is real purple glass, but that's also very rare. So
interesting.
Yeah.
You had mentioned a little bit earlier about a couple of things that people are doing, like seeding the beaches and what have you. What are someone had told me once too about people selling fake beach glass as well. What are some other things that are going? It's like black market of beach glass happening here.
Yeah. So if you go to Michael's, they actually have jars of fake sea glass. So I've seen people try and pawn that off as real sea glass, which is not cool.
Yeah.
There are also people who are tumbling their own glass and then making crafts and stuff out of it and calling it sea glass. Which, I mean, not to say what you're doing is wrong, but if you're trying to sell it as actual sea glass from the sea, it needs to come from the sea. So a lot of festivals are doing, making great strides and making sure that whoever is a vendor at their event, I know Mermaid Tears on Prince Edward Island, their sea glass festival, it's very much if you're going to be a vendor, we need to make sure that this is real sea glass, that it's not tumbled at home, we're not using the Michael stuff. But it's crazy, like to your point, this whole world of sea glass, there is literally now like this black market for sea glass. Yeah.
It's amazing. I wonder what you could get for that chunk of pirate glass.
I don't know. I think you'd have to fight me for that one. But it's funny, like I do know friends, and I have friends that buy sea glass, sell sea glass, different places like Scotland. Some of the sea glass they get from over there is just absolutely, like the pottery is insane.
Yeah, and that's my favorite. I love pottery.
And so some people will sell pieces on Etsy and things like that. Jewelry, anyone making jewelry with sea glass. I've got some earrings on, I've got a ring on. We have Celicia Sea Gems locally that makes amazing sea glass jewelry. I know that she'll buy sea glass and she'll, wheel and deal sea glass to get great pieces and different things for her collection. So that's very normal. And so there are people that have been able to actually have businesses. Captain Kai, the sea glass guy, he was able to retire his mother by selling sea glass, and he lives on a sailboat and travels around the world, and that's all he does.
Amazing.
By selling sea glass.
Yeah.
So there are people who will buy this stuff, but I feel like if you're so into it, like my favorite pieces, I wouldn't sell them unless it was like the end of the world, and that was my only option. And then I'd be like, you're coming with me. So.
And so you mentioned a couple festivals there.
Yes.
And we did say at the outset of the show that, while winter beachcombing can actually be a thing and you could go do that, now is also the time to start planning if you want to do some of these summer festivals. So what kind of tips and tricks do you want to share with people around that?
Yeah, so if you're thinking of having a sea glass trip this summer to, let's say, two of our, golden sea glass places, Campobello Island or Gramanan Island are two great ones, start booking those trips now. Accommodations are already booking up at a lot of the great cottages. So, and the thing is with these islands, there are only so many places to stay. So if you're looking for a cottage, and I always like to say, try to book a cottage, because again, restaurants, especially in Campobello Island, there's only a few restaurants. So book now. Especially if you're planning to go to Campobello Island for their Sea Glass Festival. So they do the big Campobello Island Sea Glass Festival every September. Labor Day weekend is kind of like the weekend to be there. It's when I always go. I'm very excited to be going again this year. They have beachcomber markets, high tide markets. There's beach tours where you can go out with some of the locals. Stephanie Anthony, she's the Island Sea Glass girl. She knows all the best places. So it's a really great opportunity to get with other women who are just passionate about beachcombing and sea glass and hang out. But you want to book soon, because again, there's only so many accommodations, and I know a lot of the places already are booked up because the usual's guilty. Book up, at the end of the year when they're at this year's festival. So that's something to definitely look forward to.
Okay.
And for people who are in the Moncton area who are looking for, they can't go away for a weekend out to an island, what are some tips about getting to nearby beaches or day trip beaches that would be where to
nearby
look?
beaches, I always tell people, even the beaches that might not have sea glass in the summer, i.e. Parley Beach, you don't find sea glass there in the summer. I found sea glass there in the winter because there's no one less people at the beach, they're not cleaning it every day. So just find beaches that aren't iced over. Often, now some of them might be, but starting in early April, we get warm weather, you will start to see some become more open in the Shediac area around Campobello, going close to Bugtush. But you can also do Seaglass day trips. So I have friends that go to Tinkle Beach or the secret Seaglass Beach in Blacks Harbor. So that's, a 2-hour drive, but
Worth it.
Worth it. Yeah, you go in the morning, you pack a picnic lunch, time it around the tide, because the best part of that beach is only accessible at low tide. But yeah, you can spend a whole day there and find some absolute treasures. I have friends that went this weekend that found reds and bottles and all kinds of great stuff.
That sounds like so fun.
It
I
was
wanna go now.
amazing. Yeah, I know. Let's go. Get in the Charles road trip. We're gonna get our producer to put us in the car and go. I actually I went and did a day trip there, and I couldn't find the beach, and I was messaging Crystal. I'm like, I cannot find. Tell me where to go, and she's like, just keep walking. Just you need to go just a little bit further, and then once you do, you're like, whoa.
Yes,
because
and
you can see it.
Don't block the ferry because
kind of
there is a sign in the Coastal Transport office, and I feel like I might have been responsible because I had a TikTok about that beach that went viral, and then next thing I knew, that sign popped up. But please do not block the ferry terminal or the ferry lanes or the truckers or things like that. But yes, it's a great beach to go
respectably. Absolutely. What about speaking of respectably, sea glass etiquette, picking everything up or leaving stuff behind?
So I like to encourage people, it's tempting, but try to leave some for other people. If you've gotten some really great pieces, you don't need to pick every piece of white or green on the beach. If you find really great blues, obviously no one's going to judge you to take every gorgeous blue that you find. Also make sure it's cooked. Make sure that it's tumbled and frosted. Don't pick fresh glass because that's, it's not really technically sea glass yet.
Right.
And the final etiquette thing that I like to recommend is never ask people what their sea glass beach is. There are ways around it, but if anyone's ever, and I'm sure people listening will have been in a Sea Glass Facebook group at some point where they have made the mistake of saying, oh, what beach did you find that at? And then people attack them. That is completely normal. I think we've all been personally yelled at in a Facebook group about sea glass. The way around it is just saying, hey, look, I'm new to Sea Glass. Can you give me any advice? Can you give me any tips? And if someone's open to sharing some locations, they will probably mention that in that conversation.
Right.
But never in a Facebook group say, what beach should I go to? Because you will just get attacked by the Kraken. The Kraken will come out and you will feel the wrath.
Yeah, been there. Yeah.
Yes. So, but if people are looking for some tips and some advice, they can find that on your website and on your socials. Tell everyone where they can follow along.
Right.
On your
So
adventures.
go to eastcoastmermaid.com. That is honestly the best place. I have a menu tab that literally says Sea Glass at the top, and you can drop down and find all of my guides, everything you need to know about the Sea Glass Beach in Blacks Harbor. And we've got a lot of really cool things coming this summer. Can't talk about all of it yet, but we're looking to add some more opportunities to Sea Glass together and do things in the Sea Glass world this year. So definitely make sure to go there. And on Instagram, it's at eastcoast_mermaid. So I'm always posting all of my finds there too.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, I know. Now we get to have the really fun part of digging through her collection for a while. So.
We'll take photos.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week.